Good evening and welcome to the Healthy Debate. My name is Lindy Naughton. Our aim with this programme, which is produced by Health Freedom Ireland in conjunction with the Irish Inquiry, is to promote debate on issues relating to health in Ireland. Much of the material you will see on this live stream is unavailable in the mainstream media. So if you like what we're doing, you want to support us, please press share on your screens now. Well, as we know, the only story in health continues to be COVID-19 or World War C, as we're calling it. So we'll start off with a quick run through of what's been going on in a pretty busy couple of weeks in the health world. For a start, there's been a bit of a shake-up in the Department of Health, with a chap called Robert Watt moved in as top dog from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. Bet you never knew that existed. One of the days last week, he was spotted sneaking into Dr. Tony Holohan's daily media sermon and stood silently at the back. Word is that the men do not get on that well. Watt, for instance, was in favour of opening up the country at a time when Holohan was determined we would stay locked down, preferably forever. So watch this space. He must have been moved in there for some reason. The positive the positive test results continue to rise, but it's peak winter virus season after all, so this is only to be expected. And the good news is that even allowing for the unreliable PCR test, the numbers are down this week, or they were. Today looked a bit dodgy again. That's going by the HPSC data for the past fortnight, by the way, not by sensationalist media reports, and not even the CSO, which, to be honest, I find a bit confusing. But by all means, please go and look up this data yourselves. Here I gathered together some facts from the fortnight period from January 4th to the 17th. 217 deaths were notified with COVID-19 mentioned on the death certs. Of those, 85 were over 85, and a total of 199 were over 65. Though, as the HPSC admits, these figures need adjusting, and in fairness to them, they do adjust them all the time, which is why I like their site particularly. And they usually go down, by the way. This is another interesting thing. Up until the past few weeks, the HPSC was also giving us the vital information, which was how many of the people who died were already pretty ill. They had at least one, and many had up to three, what they call comorbidities, underlying health conditions. For some reason, they've stopped doing that. I don't know why, because the facts, when you look at the facts of the deaths from people who were, well, they haven't found anything wrong with them, it's only around 150. So, which isn't it's not a very scary figure, let's face it. So heaven knows why they've stopped giving us this information. And if you're listening, anybody from the HPSC, you know, we'd love to hear from you, because we like what you're doing and we get lots of good information from you. Sorry about that. Now, ICU, as we know, we hear a lot, because we all know now that the PCR test is something of a joke. And so people look to the ICU rates to see if they can make some sense about what's going on. Well, of the 66,866 cases, in inverted commas, reported in the weekend from the 4th to the 17th of January, 2,553 were hospitalised and 140 admitted to ICU. That's a rate of 0.21%. Again, not very frightening. Staggering. Now, this figure I came across, and I'm still looking at it and thinking, can this possibly be true? A staggering 176,236 tests were taken in the first weeks of January. That's a massive amount of tests. There's been over 2 million tests in total since last March. It's worth noting that every year, without fail, hospitals struggle to deal with this virus season. It comes around, we all know. You could take the newspapers from any year, and I could speak as a journalist, I remember it. You recycle the same stories every winter virus season. They're interchangeable. The shameful thing is that the people in the HSE stand back, see this every year, and do nothing to make sure it'll never happen again. Indeed, I sometimes think that maybe our revered CMO might take a little break from presenting the daily media fear fest and decide to maybe concentrate on looking at his own department and trying to sort it out, because it'll be back next year, I guarantee you, vaccines or no vaccines. Which brings us to the vaccines. And the big news today is that there is I think it was a 91 million bonus for doctors and pharmacists who are going to be administering the vaccine. Quite extraordinary how they can find money for these things when they can't find money to pay junior nurses, for example, or cleaning services. Anyway, that's a nice little bonus. Say nothing. As far as I'm concerned, these hastily produced miracle cures based on a synthetically created genome of the likely virus were prioritized for the vulnerable, as we know, many of whom are already fairly ill and probably in the last stages of their lives. So although once again the media are sensationalizing the stories about elderly people taking the virus and dying, it's surely no surprise that these people who were vaccinated were, the vaccine was actually just the final insult to their already very frail bodies. So I'm not sure we should take that so seriously. Obviously, there's a strong case for not vaccinating people who are in the last stages of their lives. Anyway, it's pretty clear, even given the money, that the vaccines are supposed to be the holy grail, of course, but they seem to me to be no more than a get-out card, a very expensive get-out card for politicians who know they drastically mishandled this crisis and they aren't prepared to admit to the consequences of their mistakes, because what will they face? Can you imagine if they turn around to the Irish population and say, lads, we got it wrong, all your sacrifices, it was just rubbish, it's not going to happen. One final point. We are a country of 5 million people. Of those, about 66,000, the figure we mentioned already, 66,866 have tested positive. That's a mere 1.3% of the population. Just think about that for a while. Just think about it. One of the main concerns for all of us now is when it's all going to end. We've had 10 months of stop-start lockdowns, with the death rate pretty much as normal. So what the hell is going on? It's widely recognised. There's 30 studies at this stage saying they do not make any difference. Lockdowns make no difference. So why are they carrying on with them? I don't know. What they have definitely done is wreaked havoc on the country's economy, in particular on small businesses, many of which have shut down, never to return. Our guests tonight have personal experience of this. We have 3 guests. They're all from small food producing. We'll talk to them now in a minute and they'll explain. They're all involved in that area of work, which has changed radically over the 10 months and for the better in some cases. So in some ways, this program is a bit different. It's showing that there are positive effects from forcing us to go back into our communities. So we will start with our first guest, who's Ciaran Casey of mast.ie, who helps, his job, as I understand it, Ciaran, is to coordinate the activities of hundreds of outdoor markets around the country. Am I right? Good evening.
Hi, Lindy. Thanks for having me on the show. No, that's not exactly true. What MAST does, we manage an insurance scheme on behalf of people who trade at markets and also for people who operate markets, because it's a requirement for traders at all of the markets that you see, even the traders you see on selling flowers on Grafton Street and the traders on O'Connell Bridge, they all have to have liability insurance cover before they're able to trade at the designated locations. So we manage a scheme which gives insurance cover to about 2,500 traders. Just past our 10th birthday. We started on the 1st of January 2011.
All right. And what's your own background?
I was a trader in very varied background, now, to be quite honest. I've I'm a 68-year-old granddad, so I've been working since 1972, thereabouts. Um, I was a private investigator in London for
Right.
about 3 years, and then I came back to Dublin. The family came back to Dublin, and I worked as a sales rep for various companies. And I could never really settle into the, if you like, the 9 to 5 way of life. It seemed to be very stifling to me. So I got an opportunity to become a street trader, and from 1985 until 2002, I ran a jewellery stall directly across the road from Trinity College.
Oh wow. All
Um,
right. And woolly hats. Did you do woolly hats as well?
we sold woolly hats, sarongs, kind of all kinds of sunglasses, a lot of Celtic jewellery. We were the first people to introduce Celtic jewellery into Dublin. That kind of came about with the advent of the Celtic Tiger. Um, so yes, it was very interesting. I mean, we had Sinead O'Connor was there, John Malkovich, Phil Coulter, who's just passed away. They did a photo shoot in Trinity, and he bought a box of imitation Ray-Bans for his orchestra, and haggled kind of seriously over the price. Um, in 2002, I felt that I wanted to go back to education, so I enrolled in the BA in philosophy in the Milltown Institute, and did a couple of years there. But a family crisis intervened, and I had to defer from that course, and then ended up doing the last ever radio course in IADT in Dún Laoghaire. Um, and as a result of that, I ended up as a part-time presenter with RTE, doing programs about Dún Laoghaire's Festival of World Cultures. And that came to an end in 2010 when RTE declined to sponsor the festival. And it was out of that, because 2010 I lost 2 jobs, and the company my partner Alicia worked for was taken by the recession. So in the space of about 10 weeks, all of our jobs and all of our income was taken from us. So MAST came out of that. My experience as a trader, Alicia's experience in the insurance industry, came together, and we formed MAST, and here we are now. You
So
can see it.
so there was
But,
no. So when you were trading in front of Trinity or across the road from Trinity, were you insured?
oh yes, yeah, yeah. Well, that only came into being in 1995 with the 1995 Casual Trading Act. Prior to that, traders didn't require insurance, but it was Irish public bodies who provide insurance for every government department, every local authority, for the OPW. They then, because of the whole kind of increase in earning potential, and the kind of the focus on money as God, which came about with the Celtic Tiger, we started following the American example of litigation. So there were an increasing number of claims being directed against Dublin City Council and other councils. So as a result of that, Irish public bodies then insisted that traders had to have their own individual insurance. So it became part and parcel of the trading industry.
Right. So I mean, you obviously have had an adventurous life in work, which is pretty unconventional, and so perhaps you were better prepared for what's going on now than others, or is it very different, this lockdown scenario?
Well, to be honest, the whole situation took us by surprise. We did not expect such a draconian set of kind of rules and regulations to be put in place. And our business fairly collapsed in February, March, April, um, with nobody able to there was nobody able to trade. And one of the interesting things is that we saw clarification, because we had a good number of our clients, or members as we call them, right, contacting us and saying, well, look, we sell food, and food is an essential outlet. If the shops can open, why can't we? And so this is a good example of governmental action or governmental inaction. We contacted the Department of the Taoiseach, and I ended up speaking to somebody in the Taoiseach's office. Excuse me one sec.
You okay
And
there?
explained the situation, and we were advised to contact Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation. So I ended up having a couple of telephone conversations with Eamon McCracken, who's Heather Humphrey's private secretary, and we exchanged emails, and we were assured that the minister would look into this. Then that was, say, 2 or 3 weeks in March. Then about the 2nd or 3rd of April, we got an email back from the DBEI saying that they were in the department to deal with it all, and we should be talking to the Department of the Taoiseach. So we were back at square one. And then I spoke to the Department of the Taoiseach again and ended up talking to an official in the Department of Agriculture. That was on the advice of this lady from the Department of the Taoiseach. And this was the sanest conversation I'd had in about 6 weeks. The official explained that basically because of governmental decrees, that any markets taking place on local authority facilities had to be seen to conform to the government rules and regulations. But markets that were taking place in private locations could actually go ahead as long as they observed the social distancing and hygiene requirements.
So the same as shops, in other words, would it be?
It was, yeah. But we asked if some information could be put onto the governmental website about this, and that fell on kind of deaf ears. Nothing happened. So it was just a matter of us sharing that information, because we send out bi-weekly newsletters. So any updates that we had regarding the trading situation, we put that into the newsletter.
Right. So has what's gone on, has it been good for business? I mean, I know I've barely moved out of the area I live in the last while. So, and I've supported the local shops. So has it been good for the markets? Have the markets benefited from people sticking close to home?
They certainly, when the kind of the restrictions were eased off and they allowed the markets to reopen, there was an explosion of trade. People were kind of very, very keen and eager to get back trading. But the problem being is that a lot of the non-food traders felt that their businesses were not getting kind of the turnover they need. So there was a lot of fallout from crafters and artists who just basically gave up. They contacted us to cancel their insurance, looking for refunds. So on that level, yes, there's been a big effect on the arts and craft ends of business. On the food end of business, then we saw new initiatives start to come in place. The neighbour food scheme was the brainchild of a man in Cork, Jack Crotty. And the whole idea for neighbour food was to allow artisan food producers to deliver their produce to a pickup point. The orders would then be assembled into the respective boxes, and the person who placed the order would be given a pickup time. They would drive down to the pickup point, open up the boot of their car, the box would be put in there, and they drive off. No physical contact between them and the person running the actual pickup outlet. And talking to some of the traders who have become involved in that scheme, they've actually said that it's been a revelation for them, because when you go to trade at a market, you have to estimate how many items you're going to sell in a particular day. And if you're selling perishable food items, if you haven't sold 20 objects or 25 items by the end of the day, they have to be binned. Whereas with the neighbour food, you're making exactly to order, so there was no waste. So they found that their profit margins increased.
Right.
So that's been one good news story. Also, what we've seen too is that the number of inquiries we've received from people who are actually looking at becoming mobile food vendors and mobile coffee vendors has increased, and people have become much more inventive in how they try to locate a trading spot as well. We've seen pubs that can't open giving over their beer gardens to food vendors and allowing them to operate a takeaway service from there. So there has been a lot of lateral thinking.
Right. Just out of curiosity, before we get on to Liam and Owen, we bring them in a second. you're talking about the craftspeople that are your members, that they've kind of fallen off, that they're gone. Are they entitled to the PUP? Just out of curiosity, are they getting any money coming in at all?
Um, Offhand, I kind of off the top of my head, I wouldn't be sure if because a lot of the traders, particularly artists and crafters, they would not be full-time traders. I think a lot of them would have a kind of a day job as well. So under the terms of the compensation schemes, I'm sure some of them are eligible. But it wasn't really, it didn't really become a topic of conversation. The other area that, of course, for traders, especially artists and crafters, is the online thing. So Etsy has boomed. People selling from their own websites. That's taken off too. So it's very hard to gauge exactly the overall impact, because there's no governmental statistics about the value of the market trading industry to the Irish Exchequer. None whatsoever. Never has been.
Yeah.
And there is no government department that actually takes responsibility for this.
Right. We'll come back to my family members involved in the craft, so I'm well aware of these things. We'll go to Liam of Tribal Foods in Galway. Liam, are you there?
I am indeed, yeah.
So
How are you?
So what's your story?
Well, I suppose I'm primarily a fruit and vegetable producer. So we're based here in Galway, in Athenry, about 15k outside of Galway City. And we farm 5 acres of glasshouses. So, well, I suppose my market would be between the fresh market, restaurant trade, and wholesale trade. So we kind of sell through a range of different places. So the main crops that we would produce would be salads, tomatoes, peppers, chili peppers and tomatoes is what we're mostly known for. We also produce then a range of sauces, which would be primarily chili based. So that's kind of the short version of who I am and what we do.
How long are you in business?
Well, I'm a third generation grower, so
right.
For me it's generational. I've been working in my own right since 2002. Before that, I would have worked for my father and had done 3 years of horticulture college here. Spent a few years working across throughout the UK and Europe as well. So yeah, I'm kind of, it's ingrained in me.
So what have the last 10 months been like for you then? How has it affected you?
Well, I suppose farming, you're looking at every year we're throwing a different curveball anyway. We never get a straightforward year. So I suppose COVID was just another problem that we had to overcome. Initially in early March, we were looking at what was happening in Italy and the lockdowns coming. We were cranking up for agritourism. We were launching into agritourism in 2020, or we were supposed to. So we did a lot of flyers and promotional material done for that. And once we seen what was happening in Italy, I simply forced all that materials on all my customers in Galway and Athenry markets and said, look, there's my contact details. If there is a lockdown coming here, email me and we'll sort out deliveries. So literally within 2 weeks, we went on to just doing home deliveries.
Right, and how's it going?
That went well, but I mean, it got us through the initial lockdown fantastically. It meant that we had money coming in because we were farming, we were working, we wouldn't have been entitled to any payments or no PUP. So we needed that cash flow to keep coming. The 6 weeks of the first lockdown, we were very busy with deliveries. And then once the lockdown eased, that end of things fell away. But the markets reopened at that stage. So we had we were back doing the direct retail through the markets.
Right. So Owen, are you there? Owen Gallagher is from Cork.
How are you doing?
Yeah, there you, Calis Kitchen. So Owen, what's your story and what's it like down in Cork, if I've got the right place?
Yeah. So I run a business called Calis Kitchen for the last 8 years. Farmers markets would be probably 3/4 of the business, and 25 would be home catering. And I suppose coming into March, I actually was getting out of the game. I had my business ready to be sold. I had a guy trained in for a few months, and COVID came along, and that all kind of fell through. And in the meantime, I had taken a job with a cafe in Kinsale, who incidentally were one of the hosts of Neighbour Foods that Ciaran was speaking about there. So I kind of actually was producing for them for a while, but because my business sale fell through, I had to go back and take over the business again. And because I had a lease on a premises, I had to keep that going, and so I either shut the doors or just try to keep it going. I was lucky with the pub payment that kind of kept me going for the first lockdown. But after that, then like things when they opened up again, I just found initially, like Ciaran said there was this kind of surge of people wanting to get out and support local again, and but coming into say Paddy's Day, that's a huge time for us. That was cancelled. Peak time in the summer, that was cancelled. You're opening up again around in November. There's nothing happening. Coming into December, then my local market, which is Wilton, the space we use is it's a private space. So it's in a shopping centre, and they require the spaces back. So we got actually asked to, like we do every year, to leave the space for the month of December. So at that stage, I had nothing, no catering jobs, nothing. It was just really, really tough to survive.
And so, what's it like for other kind of market businesses in Cork, say in the English?
The English market is open as far as I know. But again, I think it's very quiet in there. Like anyone I know who's in the English market, was probably looking to get out of it. It's not somewhere that I would be a lot, but generally anyone with a premises, I think, really suffered, because you've got your renting rates. I know the government did give breaks on the rates and things like that, but it's very hard. You still have to keep the place going. The bills are still coming in and stuff like that. So it's very hard to when there's not that much business. I think a lot of stuff went online. A lot of the pickup schemes, box schemes, deliveries. I know that a lot of the traders from the markets went on to Neighbour Food, and they didn't come back off it. It really works for them. And so it's quite positive in that way.
So you don't do Neighbour Food, do you not?
Personally, no. See, the product I have it's a hot food product. Now I have done things for ready meals and things like that. But I'm finding at the moment there's a market for me in young families, or families who are working on the front line. I've got a couple on board now, and it's kind of spreading word of mouth. So I'm doing kind of meals for the week. It's small orders, but you're getting 2 or 3 a week, and that's kind of paying the bills at the moment. So for people with newborn babies and working on the front line, elderly parents, and unfortunately there's a lot of fear. They can't get out, they won't go out, especially the elderly, and there's a market for it. These people need food as well, and they're happy just to get it delivered, left on the door, and so there is definitely a market there for it. There is always some type of work, but personally I find you just have to go find it and modify it.
Are you actually a chef by background rather than a gardener, say?
Yeah, no, I'm a chef by trade.
Right, yeah.
So I worked in restaurants and hotels before I did this, went traveling, and then decided I wanted to do my own thing. So that's my kind of background.
So that's a bit different. So the three of you actually have quite different backgrounds with a relationship to the market, in a sense. What I've been wondering, for some reason I decided to read a book called Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher, which I originally read when I was about 20, which is a long time ago. And I'm finding it very interesting, because his argument is that small is beautiful, obviously, that we're not designed to be put into massive settlements, if you like cities, and that in fact the the small market way of doing it and the small holding way of doing it is the only way we'll survive. So I'm wondering, maybe Ciaran, I think you have an interest in that kind of thing too. Do you feel that maybe this lockdown is kind of forcing people maybe to think that they should value what's on their doorstep more?
Interesting question. I think it would, if there was not such a miasm of fear being broadcast through the mainstream media. Because when people are exposed to levels of fear, it increases cortisol in the system, increases stress, and that actually stops people being able to think about any problem that confronts them or any situation in a rational, dispassionate type of way. I personally agree that small is beautiful. I think that large business corporations are actually anathema to human happiness. There is an economic ideology called distributism, which I've tried to interest various journalists in, which actually says that big business, large corporations do not serve society, and that happy societies would be served far greater by having hundreds and hundreds of thousands of small, self-sustaining individual businesses that are all contributing to the greater good of the whole. It also reckons that the banking practice of usury as practiced by all of the major commercial banks is wrong and should be abolished, and that we should have a communal banking system, something similar to the credit union model. But as I've said to Liam earlier, it is an ill wind that blows nobody any good. If the crises that are being created by this lockdown compel people to think about organising their lives in a different way, then so much the better. But we'll need to have an awful lot of people wanting to organise their lives in such a way that they actually say no to the narrative that's been presented to us. Because it does seem to me that the goal of this narrative is one of control, of actually reducing people's ability to make their own decisions for themselves and forcing them to accept a draconian set of rules and regulations that have nothing to do with individual happiness and all to do with governmental control. Have I digressed a little bit there?
No, I mean, I'm on the same page as you are. I'm just wondering, with Liam, what struck me was the kind of vegetables that you would grow aren't necessarily native. I mean, do you know what I'm saying? What do you think about what we've just been discussing with Ciaran there?
Yeah, well, we do also grow a wide range of other vegetables, but what we specialise in and what we are known for is for the tomatoes, peppers, chilies, that end of things. While they are grown in glass houses, they're all grown still in a very traditional manner. They're grown in the soil, in a natural season. We don't heat the glass houses. It's all natural light that's used. It's a more difficult way of growing, but we do it that way basically for flavour, and it's on that basis that we have built up our customer base. We drive as much flavour as possible into our food naturally. But you still have, I suppose what I'm seeing on the market is that people are looking to support local, number one, because they've recognised that local people are hurting throughout this crisis, and they are looking to try to spend their money as locally as possible. But secondly, they're looking for fresh and healthy vegetables. And I don't think that's out of a fear of COVID. That's because they're working from home, they're spending more time at home. There isn't the same time pressure on them for cooking. They now have more time to be able to cook, and they're willing to spend more time doing it. So they are looking for a wider range of products also, which certainly would have helped the type of products that I sell this year. So I don't know, does that answer your question or not? But
well, I suppose what I'm thinking is that we have these giant corporations, well, that farming has become, if we can call fruit and veg farming even, I think some people don't even believe it's worthy of the name, but that most of the fruit and vegetable we get, I suspect, still comes from abroad. Am I right?
Large portion, yes. And the number of commercial vegetable farmers in Ireland is falling year on year. There's less than 130 commercial vegetable farmers left in Ireland at the moment.
That's a disgrace, isn't it?
It is. It's an absolute disgrace. But look, that's a lack of foresight on the part of the government. It's a lack. They don't seem to think that it actually matters. I suppose there has been a lack of investment, a massive lack of investment in horticulture in general over a long time. And while we've seen other countries have bound forward, here in this country, I think for the first time now we're hearing that if farmers do generate electricity where they're allowed to earn an income from that, and we're looking at massive amount of land, certainly us with the glass houses, with the amount of roofs that we have in place, we could be generating solar, we could be generating wind, from wind we have the room to do it. But if we did previous to this, we had to give that electricity away free to the grid, and we were the only country in Europe where that system was in place. Now, I believe there's talks about changing that, but I'd like to see what kind of structure is put around that to before I start applauding them. But we've been stuck in a very 1950s style thinking as regards horticulture here in this country by every government since, really. There's been no real progression.
What was it like, says me, being very innocent, what was it like in the 1950s? It was all cows, wasn't it?
It would have been very. It's just that there's been a lack of investment in the infrastructure around horticulture. There's been a few projects that have been pushed forward that, and I suppose, look, the likes of Keelings in North County Dublin, that the way that they've developed their business on the last 20 years is phenomenal. So there has been some development. O'Connor's as well in Wexford with the plants and tomatoes. So, but overall, you had a huge number of smaller farmers that were putting up sections of glass houses, which meant they could extend the season, which means that you don't have to import to the same extent. But so there was investment around that in the 60s and early 70s, but it died after that. So the way that we produce food now is basically we are only producing our vegetables now in the seasons that it's easiest to do so. We could be producing a lot more, but it is cheaper to import than it is to produce.
It's shocking, isn't it? It's really shocking. What I'm thinking with Owen, in your background, more as a chef, what did you learn about using local produce and so on when you were training, and where did you train?
I did my training in CIT within the apprenticeship, then different restaurants and hotels in Cork over 3 years. As regards learning about it or being taught about it, nothing comes to mind as in, promote local, there was everything, like we were brought to the English market, on groups, we were brought to different farms and, days out and things like that. And it was more to see how food was produced. You went to an abattoir, you went to different places, but as for prioritizing local, it's not in my mind that was something that was promoted to us. It was more just where food comes from, I suppose in a way that is, you are looking, farm to fork and things like that. But I think it depends on what restaurant you're working in. You have the likes of, there's that one down in Middleton in East Cork, Sage, and they have like a 12-kilometre radius where they only source their ingredients from 12 kilometres, which is a great idea, but it comes down to price point, I think, and, as chefs, you're taught the business side as well. And the margins, and if you're working for someone who's looking to increase their profits. You know, it's the cheapest ingredients, and that often can be imported veg or cheaper veg or not necessarily local, you know.
Well, what I'm kind of thinking is, are the next generation? Have you children?
I have two boys, yeah, 3 and 5.
Well, they're a bit young, but my father actually was a chef. I mean, he was in the hotel business, and he was a great cook. And I have a sister and a brother who were fantastic cooks. We all learned how to cook, and I think that was probably unusual. I think would it be a problem that people aren't learning how to garden for themselves and aren't learning how to cook for themselves at a at a basic level.
Yeah, I like the younger generation. I don't, you know, I teach my two kids how to cook. You know, they can cook scrambled eggs at 3 and 5. You know, we have a polytunnel out in the garden, which I decided, I saw the lockdown coming last February. I ordered a polytunnel. I said, why not? Why wait? They're really keen in getting out and seeing stuff growing, and so, but that's just me. Like, I don't think that's very common. Um, I think this should be taught in school. Um, at a very young age.
Yeah.
Teaching them about food, teaching them, just have a class where you're tasting things, where you know, I remember watching a program there in the UK, and they were asked the kids, where do chickens come from, and the answer was Tesco, and they couldn't tell the difference between sweet corn and beetroot, which was shocking. Like, I assume that people know that, um, but yeah, like I would like to kind of pass on some information with regards to maybe teaching, or especially on the Health Freedom Ireland platform, which that's why I came to know you guys here. But there is a good platform there, and we have been in discussion with it. Maybe just free tutorials, just basic cooking, or just things like preserving or pickling, different things like that, where you got to get sensible about your food. You got to, we can't afford to be wasting food. I don't think anymore. We've got to be smarter, and learn how to cook the cheaper cuts of meat, how to use things that aren't pre-packaged, because they're expensive, they're not environmentally friendly, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I've noticed food shortages have started. Whether that's Brexit, whether that's another tactic by the globalists, I don't know, but I have noticed it's very hard to get certain things. So I think we just start to get clever about that.
What's well, the only thing I've noticed I can't find is balsamic vinegar, but what's not coming in at the moment? I wonder.
I've noticed things like, sunflower oil, like iceberg lettuce, courgettes. Like, I go to my veg wholesaler, and the price of courgettes has tripled for some unknown reason, so I can't afford to pay €20 a box for a couple of courgettes. But in a way, then I just say, well, what else can I use, And I think in a way we might have to get back to local food that way. We might be forced to do it, but I think a lot of this stuff that's gone on in this pandemic is we're being forced into a different way. It's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, no,
See the positives there.
yeah. Well, Liam as well. As a third generation gardener, you were saying. Do you think? Do you think it would be possible maybe to have gardening taught in schools, that that through this pandemic, as Owen was saying, that we can get back to realizing that you can make something fairly decent out of a turnip. Mind you, I need a bit of convincing there, but um,
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I'm a firm believer in trying to drive food education through the school system. Also, like Owen said, it does absolutely need to start young, but it needs to be continued right through. The in secondary school, I know I have 4 daughters myself. Now they're
right.
between 20 and 28, so they're at the other end of things. But they would all have learned how to cook at home here, from very young, just like Owen said his children do. But when it came to the home economics in secondary school, it's not fit for purpose nowadays. It's making the sum total of the food seems to be making brown bread, soda bread, which there's no harm in, but that seemed to take 3 months. And it was just constantly describing, having to make brown bread and describe what the taste was, what the texture was, and all from lists of words that were pre-described for you. So they weren't even allowed to use their own vocabulary. It had to come from a list that was given from the teacher. And my eldest daughter dropped out of home economics. She just went, this is just absolute rubbish. And the others just decided, no, we know more than the teacher already, so there's no point. So it does need to be nutritionally based. It needs to, but also we need to be able to teach them how to cook with the seasons, cook seasonally. And while we do have an abundance of fruit and vegetables over the summer months, naturally, it's how can they be preserved, and not preserved just into high sugar style products. There's other ways of preserving them using vinegars and oils and that as well, or simply by freezing. So it's teaching people how to do that, I think, is very important. A large part of my customer base in Galway market would be from Eastern Europe originally, and they would, in season, they will come, they will buy 10, 15, 20 kilos of tomatoes at a time, and that is for making sauces to carry themselves through the year. And it's not, I think during the boom, during the Celtic Tiger years here in Ireland, people looked at preserving food as being something that only poor people do and started looking down on it. While that has started to change now, the easiest way to change that is through education and to just redress that situation. And it needs to be done quite quickly, I think. But it's, yeah, there's lots we can do. And just with Owen on the courgettes, the reason they're so expensive at the moment is snow in Spain.
Fair enough.
But I think that every school should have a small garden. That if you could teach children how to grow things, that it would be a start, and then teach them how to cook them. We're so very, very far behind in these things, but compared to other countries. So we're slightly running out of time here. So we've heard this talk, I don't know if it's paranoia or what, about the Great Reset. Do you think it might be possible to have a small reset, thanks to lockdown, through kind of more local food, encouraging people to grow their food, to cook it? I think when people find out how to pickle and everything, it's fantastic. I've discovered it myself. It's very rewarding. So we'll start with you, Ciaran, since you're the philosopher of the group.
Thank you very much. Is it possible to have a small reset? Well, this is my hope. And the reset has to happen with each individual. People have to understand that they are in control of their own destiny. They are in control of their own lives, and they have to start living life according to their own internal narrative, and not the narrative that's been presented by mainstream media. Yeah. And if enough people do it, I mean, one of my mentors used to say that if about 10% of the world could switch their thinking into that mode, that the ripple effect would spread throughout society and would cause change. Now, how long that change might take to be affected is anybody's guess. But we've got to start somewhere, because if we don't, we're doomed.
Well, I think the big problem, something I was reading today, was pointing out that everything we do now is determined by technology, actually, that all the big billionaires, their fortunes are based on technology. So, as you say, some of us don't relish the prospect of being wrong. What is it, artificial intelligence and everything? But Liam, I'll just ask you, what are you hoping for, let's say, in the next 6 months?
What am I hoping for? Some sunshine. I suppose, just to expand a little bit on what Ciaran said in a way about the ripple effect, I'm kind of starting to see a little bit of that on the ground now, where people are spending more time. They're starting to look inward a lot more. They're looking at they have started to evaluate their lives in not even in a philosophical sense, but they've realized that they're spending the guts of 10 to 20 hours a week sitting in cars trying to get to work and trying to get home from work. So they are starting to understand the quality of life that they were missing out on. And one interesting thing that I noticed in the markets in about July, I had a surge of people coming looking for what would have been more unusual crops and the fruit and vegetables that normally wouldn't sell in high quantities. There was lots of people coming looking for them, and for a few weeks I struggled to understand why. And then I was talking to one young man. He was only in his mid-20s, and he's explained to me that he'd watched everything that there was to be watched on Netflix, and he was now reduced to watching The Chef's Table and other shows like that. And did you know that you could cook celery in so many different ways? And this was a man who never cooked before in his life. From what I understood from the conversation I had with him, even growing up, he had takeout, he had ready meals the whole time. And at 25 years of age or thereabouts, he was cooking for the first time ever. And when you see things like that, and I suppose with me selling fruit and vegetables, a lot of people, you see them looking at a particular veg. They may pick up a head of celeriac, and you can see them looking at it, and you know they haven't a clue what it is. So you tell them what it is, you tell them a few simple ways to cook it, they chance it, they buy it, they come back next week and go, do you have anything else like that? You know, and so they are looking now they're asking, and they're experimenting, they're trying. But I think more importantly, they've learned that with the lockdowns and with the forced stays at home, they do actually have a little bit better quality of life. And so I do think that ripple effect that Ciaran spoke about might be just starting. Hopefully that continues on.
Grand. And your cell phone, have you any final thoughts on what might happen in your end of things? You're looking for a job in Kinsale still, are you?
No, I've done that for a few months, and I don't think I was equipped to. I think I need to work for myself. That's the kind of. I think I do, but then in the last few months, I suppose one thing that's come into my life is community, and new tribes. I've just realised I found a lot of really great people recently, all on here, and you know it's really good. And like I've gone through the Facebook groups and this and that, and you know. There was a lot of negative energy that was just really getting me down. Mental health was suffering, and I realized I can't, you know, be in these places where people are giving out about the government, this, that, and the other, and it was getting me down. And then I found a good tribe of people on here, and I think there's a lot of positive. It's like, okay, we're here now. What are we going to do about it? You know, so I don't think we can change what's going to happen, but we can start to plan to do things. And definitely, for me anyways, community, like Ciaran spoke about individuals, but like I've been putting myself out there more. I've been speaking to people. If I see someone without a mask in a shop, I'll approach them. It's, you know, it's gone awry sometimes, and people realize, oh, I forgot my mask, and you know, get away from me. But you know, I had a guy approach me today in a shopping centre and offer his hand, and we just started speaking, and it was really nice. It was just people taking chances, putting themselves out there, building community. Like I wouldn't have done this 6 months ago. You know, I got asked to do this earlier, and you know, I just said yes straight away. You know, so I've become more of a doer. I think there's so much fear out there, and I was just like, I'm prone to it as well. But I was like, just kind of get on with it, start doing the things. That's the one thing I'm grateful for the lockdown, is it's kind of forced me into doing things that I said, like the polytunnel, as I mentioned earlier. That was always, I'll get to that, I'll do that next year, and you know, that next year may never come, you know, so I said just might as well do things now. So
brilliant. No, that's great. This has been a very positive show, I'm delighted to say, as a small-time gardener myself. So thank you, gentlemen, and I'd say we'll be talking again, because this is the healthy debate, and there's plenty to talk about on this topic that we're clearly all interested in. So thank you again, and plaudits to you all. Right. Well, don't forget that the Healthy Debate is brought to you by a group of volunteers. And today we have Stephen, and Danny is still with us briefly until she departs for the United States. And so if you want to sponsor what we're doing, or if you want to throw us a few bob, you can contribute through the Irish Inquiry page. As far, I'm right, haven't I, Stephen? Yes. So you don't have to, by the way, you don't have to. But if you do like what we're doing and you want to help, and of course, if you have any comments or views or any programs or topics you'd like to see us covering, please do get in touch. Thank you and good night.